This is Liberty Crypto Guy. And how are you doing this morning? Or whatever time it is, wherever you are in this great, wonderful world that we live in. My name is Jeff, and I am here to show you interesting things about cryptocurrency. And today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin. Now, what is Bitcoin? How did it get started? And why is it the greatest asset ever invented? Well, it got started back in 2008 when the banks all collapsed and we had that terrible crisis and the recession because of the housing crash and the markets crashed, and some people or a person got together and decided to develop a system that was not reliant upon any third party to be an intermediary between them when processing payments. I actually heard about Bitcoin sometime early in the 2000s when it was first being talked about, believe it or not, and unfortunately didn't come back to it until probably 2017 is when I heard of it again. So, you live and you learn, and you can only get in where we are now, can't go back. So, anyway, so they got together and they created this system to where between people you could trade this asset and there doesn't have to be a bank or anything in between. We can just trade from one person to another, and those transactions are verified by the miners who are basically verifying the transactions on the network. And so each block that is released every 10 minutes. And every 10 minutes, those blocks go in and are created. Now, it started out with 50 blocks originally, and then it went to 25. And this happens every 4 years at what they call the halving. We have another one coming up next April. Now, why it's not an exact date at this point is because it happens every 10 minutes, but the mining rate is dependent upon the formula that was written into the code. And that formula states that if the miners mine too many, then it adjusts and makes it harder to mine. And if they're not mining enough, then it makes it easier to mine. So then it keeps it at an average rate of about every 10 minutes. So with that being said, it goes and they released it, and it was a success, and they released it. They being Satoshi, they call him Satoshi, and Bitcoin is divided up into 100 million parts, which are called Satoshis. Nobody really knows who Satoshi or who the group Satoshi is, and if they do, they're not talking about it. And so Satoshi originally mined 1 million coins. Now there's only 21 million coins possible on Bitcoin, so it is impossible at this point in time for everyone that has $1 million to even own one Bitcoin. So it is a very scarce asset, and over time these halving rewards, they get cut in half every 4 years. So right now we're at 900 Bitcoin per day, and come next April we'll divide that in half to 450 Bitcoin per day. And that is important because it releases less and less into the system, which puts upward pressure on price, because if you have the same demand and you have an increased supply, then that supply will be eaten up and the price has nowhere to go but up. So as you can see here, we're looking at a chart of when it came out versus, until now, and you can see these huge rises, and the rises are getting smaller over time, but percentage wise, but it is still going up because it takes more dollars to put into the system to be able to raise it up to higher levels, which I have something interesting to show you based off of that, about this upcoming cycle, that after the halving, and after the halving you typically have about 18 months until all the changes take place in the system. They talk about inflation all the time. Well, Bitcoin's inflation rate is constantly going down because of the halving. And with this next halving, we'll go down to 1%. We're already at the coveted 2% that the Fed was talking about yesterday. And after the halving next year, we'll be at about 1%. So that's another interesting fact. So that's basically what Bitcoin is, and it started out nobody really believed in it, and over time more and more people believed in it, to the point of today where you want people like BlackRock, they are wanting to get into the system, and they are wanting to release a spot Bitcoin ETF. Now, what's a spot Bitcoin ETF? A spot Bitcoin ETF means that they have to actually buy the physical Bitcoin to back whatever they are doing in the market. So that just puts more pressure on the supply, which is already going to be cut in half next April. And if that spot Bitcoin ETF gets passed, we'll put more upward pressure on it, which will cause it to rise even more. Now, the last time we had the halving, it was sitting somewhere around $8,000, and until we broke the previous high from the downtrend, it didn't really take off. But you can see once that happened after the halving, it was about 6 months. So back in about November, let's see here, this big candle came in October. So back in October, and the halving was in May, so May to October, we're talking about 5 months, so about 6 months from the halving, it starts to really take off. And then it broke the all-time high in about November, so there's the 6 months. It takes about 6 months after the halving. So if our halving happens next April, then in about 6 months from next April, which would be roughly October of next year, we could be breaking the all-time high, which was set back in 2021 in November at about 70,000, 69,000 to be precise. So, very interesting. Now, what I wanted to show you is, if we look back to the previous cycle, and we scroll back to the $20,000 top that we had roughly here, and we do a Fibonacci retracement back to the low point, roughly $3,000, you can see that almost to the T, 4 times the 4 on the Fibonacci retracement comes up. So if we do that, and now you have diminishing returns every time, but if we do that again on this cycle, let's go to the weekly for this so we can see it a little better. So here we are on the weekly cycle. Oops. Let's delete that. There we go. So if we do that same thing off the $69,000 top and come roughly to here, you can see something very interesting. You can see that, well, we're not exactly at 69, but probably close enough, but this is how you change it. Go here in Trading View, go into the coordinates, and that's roughly about where we need to be. So the 4 puts us at 229,394 for the top. Now, we may only go to the 2618 or the 1618. 1618 is kind of special. That's interesting. It's around $100,000. When you talk about Fibonacci retracements, the 618 is a very popular retracement. So the expansion level of 1618 is also important. So we could go to 100,000 to the 155 level, which is another interesting level. But if we do what we did last time, which would take a tremendous amount of money, and someone like BlackRock and all these other spot Bitcoin ETFs, if they are passed, when they are passed, could take us to 229. So that is what I have for you today. Thank you for joining, and have a great day.